Welcome to Rebirth Your Mind. I'm your host, Raylene Torres. A big thank you to my best friend, Brizza, for suggesting today's episode. I'm going to be talking about attachment styles, what they are, how they form in childhood, and what they can look like in our adult lives. So let's get started. I want to start off by saying everyone has an attachment style. There are four main attachment styles that are formed by our emotional needs and physical needs. We start forming an attachment as soon as we are born. Our brain starts to pick up on patterns, our brain starts to pick up on cues, and we start to form a connection with our parents. We are not obviously able to express through communication as a child or as a baby, newborn. A lot of our connection is through crying. That's how we start associating crying with getting our needs met. So, that being said, there are the four main attachment styles. You have a secure attachment style. So, remember, there are two main needs that need to be met in the first 8 years of childhood, and that is emotional needs. That is getting your emotional needs met through your parents. So, being able to express your emotions, being able to get validated, being able to have someone attain to your emotions and teach you emotional regulation. Then you have your physical needs. So that it looks like being fed, being having clothes provided for you, having a safe space, a safe home provided for you. Starting off with the secure attachment style. So a secure attachment style builds this attachment through their caregivers because their emotional needs and physical needs are met. So these people, they are very secure in themselves. They're able to emotionally regulate in their adult lives. They're able to, be able to have great, safe, physical relationships in their adult lives. They're able to communicate effectively in their adult relationships. And ideally, the other three, which are the insecure attachment styles, the main goal about all of this is to really start leaning you to be more secure so that you can have healthy, thriving relationships and get your needs met, you know? Um, so now we have the anxious attachment style. So once again, emotional needs and physical needs, right? So an anxious attachment style child rarely got their emotional needs met and did get their physical needs met. So what that could look like in their childhood was either a parental figure was completely out of the picture, or their parental figure or both parental figures were out of the picture because they were always working, trying to provide and get those physical needs met for the child, right? And what this starts to build is it starts to build a fear of abandonment because as a child, you're not able to really process why your parent keeps on leaving, why your parent doesn't make time for you. Because obviously, like if your parent's like always working, always providing, maybe you have the nice clothes, maybe you have your own room, maybe you have, the nice phone and all that stuff, but your parent doesn't have that time balance to be able to meet your emotional needs because it's always getting the physical needs met. Okay, what does that look like in adult life? So these people tend to really, really crave connection. So they really value their friendships. They really value their relationships. These are actually like the people that you see that are like their high school sweethearts. They stay together forever, or stay together like throughout out of high school, and they're together for long relationships. They stay with their partner like their very first boyfriend, and it's because they really cling on to love and connection. So the second that they are exposed to that, they really value friendships, they really value relationships. So the anxious attachment style, I have a really soft spot in my heart for the anxious attachment style because sometimes it's not healthy. Sometimes it's not a healthy love, and they just thrive so much for that connection that they're willing to sacrifice a lot of their needs, which we'll talk about that in another episode, and when we get into needs. But they thrive from such a loving place and just wanting that connection, thriving for it. And a lot of the times, they can really neglect their own personal boundaries, their own needs. These people tend to very much not have boundaries. And I want you to know this doesn't just show up in your partner with your partner or in your relationships. This shows up like at work. This can show up with your children. This can show up with your parents. This can show up with yourself. And because their emotional needs were not met in their childhood, they lack these things that are important, like boundaries and meeting their own needs. They tend to neglect their needs a lot, and they're just operating in the form of just wanting love. So that is the anxious attachment style. Now we're moving to the dismissive avoidant. So, dismissive avoidance, once again, emotional needs, physical needs, how are they being met in their childhood? Dismissive avoidance needs are not met. So their emotional needs and their physical needs are not met. Their childhood tends to be very independent. They're forced to be very independent at a very young age. Um, so these people in their adult lives have such a huge fear around connection and closeness. So they tend to operate in fear of connection. They value their space. These people are extremely hyper independent. They take a lot of pride in their work. Um, they are workaholics. They can very much be workaholics. Um, they also have a big need for safety. These people tend to have a big core wound around feelings of dysfunction. So they feel like there's something wrong with them. They feel dysfunctional. So that is actually why they don't even strive for connection, because they automatically think that there's something wrong with them. And I want you guys to see, like, as a child, if our needs are not being met and we're not being communicated, like our parents are not communicating to us why these things are happening, just like being there for us to support us, right? We start to create stories in our mind. Like, it's inevitable. Our brain is developing, we're trying to grow these relationships or connection with our parental figures, and they're not meeting these needs. So we create these stories of like, well, maybe I'm not worthy enough, or there's got to be something wrong with me. Like, if my parents don't want to connect with me, my parents don't want to love me, my parents don't want to meet my physical or not meeting my physical needs, there's got to be something wrong with me. Now, that core wound is instilled into their brain and it shows up in their adult lives, and they feel like they have to be completely perfect at what they do because they're perfectionists. They feel like that they have to perfect things because or else there's something wrong with them. So they have this huge belief system of something is wrong with me. I'm defective. And a lot of the times they have a big core wound around feeling trapped or stuck as well. Um, that being said, they're really big on boundaries. They're not big on communicating boundaries because they really don't, they fear closeness and connection. So these types of people will completely like ghost you, completely like abandon you, and not give you any explanation. And it's just their programming. They were never shown how to connect. So this is like they don't really know how to do this. And they, just like every other attachment style, have to do the work so that they're able to have healthier relationships and just thriving relationships. Moving on to the fearful avoidant. So, emotional needs and physical needs. A fearful avoidant is actually half anxious attachment style and half dismissive avoidant. So, their physical and emotional needs were met, but they were inconsistent. So sometimes they were met, sometimes they were not. Sometimes the parental figure, was there to emotionally regulate them. Other times they weren't. Sometimes they had, their physical needs met, and sometimes there wasn't. Sometimes there wasn't food on the counter. Sometimes they didn't have, materials for school, or sometimes it was just inconsistent. It was like sometimes yes, sometimes no. What this starts to do in the childhood is you start to pick up big betrayal core wounds and big inconsistency core wounds. Um, so a lot of the times, sometimes in some cases, maybe a parental figure was had an addiction, or maybe they were like alcoholics, or they were on drugs or something. It's a very chaotic environment. And if there was a like if their parents were, for example, if their parents were alcoholics, maybe they were like really sweet, really loving, really caring when they were drunk, and then the next day they were like super cold and like, don't talk to me, leave me alone, like I'm dealing with my own things, right? So it starts to form a big betrayal core wound, because they don't know if they're able to trust their parental figures, because it's so chaotic and it's so inconsistent. And what this can look like in their adult lives is they have one, a big core wound of betrayal. And they really thrive and want connection, but they also fear it at the same time. So these people can be like very hot and cold in relationships. So like I said, they can really thrive for the connection, and the second that they're getting that connection met, they push it away, because it's like, I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if I can, trust this. So they go into fight or flight mode very quickly. Um, Another characteristic of a fearful avoidant is they also tend to be like detectives. So in they start to like in their childhood, they start to form like this awareness of like always being aware of their parental figures. Like, can I trust you? Like, are you gonna switch up on me? Like, are you good? Like, what's going on? So these people are like detectives in their adult life. Like, they can tell you like, I don't trust that person, there's something wrong, because they pick up on so many different behaviors, so many different cues. Like, they're looking at stuff, they're constantly like trying to like check out their surrounding, like, can I trust you? And the second that you give any type of and there's any type of signal or red flag of any type of betrayal, they're completely out of the picture. They'll completely abandon the situation, or get really triggered and get into fight flight mode, or freeze mode as well. So so what is like the point of knowing your attachment style? Honestly, the point is, one, to be aware that this is an attachment and it's not your personality. A lot of the times, we have connected, the detectiveness with like a personality type, or the closeness, right, of the anxious attachment style, as a personality type. Like, I'm such a lover girl, I'm such a lover boy, right? Or dismissive avoidant of like, I'm super independent, like I only do booty calls, like that type of person, right? And they claim this as their personality, but it's not a personality. It's just how you were shown how to attach to things. And a lot of the times can be unhealthy, because you're operating in a form of trauma. So that is why, I share so much about the attachment styles. I also want to make some more episodes on how you can start reprogramming. So that's one, the reprogramming is connected to the core wounds, which is my last episode, but also like what are everyday things that you can do to start leaning more secure. And truthfully, we all deserve to be secure. Just because we were shown a certain way of love, shown a certain way of physical needs, does not mean that we have to continue to operate in those things, and in those ways, because we deserve loving relationships. I think now is a new time, this is a new era, there's so much information now, and I'll say this lightheartedly, but also kind of giving some grace for our parents too, where it's like, they didn't have this information growing up. You know, in order to get anything like this, like you're paying big bucks, big money for therapy. And you know, if you grow up in a typical like household, 76% of people, you know, 76% of children have trauma with by the time they get to 18, you know, it's almost that's already leaning towards 100%. I mean, that's 76%. It's so big. So also, you know, giving a little grace to your parents can go a really long way in knowing, like, truthfully, like, they're operating as well with their own attachment style. They're operating as well with their own core wounds and doing what they think is right. Um, that has truthfully helped me a lot with my healing journey. So, thank you guys so much for being here. If you're still listening to Rebirth Your Mind, once again, just understanding your attachment style is the first step to breaking old cycles and creating healthier relationships. Please let me know what you'd like to hear me talk about in the next episode. And if this helped you, share it with someone who might need it. Until next time, I'm Raylene, reminding you that rebirth begins in the mind.